Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Tuesday, October 5th. This is Africa 54.
What would it take for Namibia's Ovaherero and Nama communities to accept Germany's genocide reparations offer? We'll explain. The secret wealth of world leaders is exposed in the Pandora Papers. And could public and private pressure turn South Africa away from coal?
We begin in East Africa, where at least 36 people were killed in clashes between people of 4 communities in South Sudan, according to Warrap state officials. Warrap Governor Leone called the latest wave of weekend fighting in Tanj East and Tanj North counties devastating. He told VOA South Sudan in Focus radio program that the clashes were linked to cattle raids and revenge attacks. Aleu says thousands have fled the region and at least 36 others were wounded. Many of the wounded could not be transported to medical care due to flooding and poor road conditions, which also prevented government forces from reaching areas of the fighting. Namibia is welcoming the payout of $1.3 billion as part of a 1904 to 1908 German genocide reparations deal. While the government calls it a step in the right direction, representatives of the Ovaherero and Nama communities, the main tribal groups affected by the German genocide, consider it a poor deal. In part 2 of our special report, representatives of the Ovaherero and Nama explain what they would consider a fair deal for the atrocities committed against their communities. Confidence Musasiri has more in this report, narrated by Jessica Kaimu.
Germany took control of Namibia, then Southwest Africa, in 1884 until it lost the colony in 1815 during World War I. German settlers brutally repressed uprisings against their rule, killing thousands of Herero and Nama people. Luther von Trotha, a German general sent by Berlin to put down the rebellion, ordered the Ovaherero and Nama people's extermination. His soldiers drove people into exile and rounded up men, women, and children, placing them in concentration camps. Many of the victims were used as slave labor in the camps, where thousands died from exhaustion, starvation, and disease.
As long as this deal does not refer or fails to refer or to recognize our identities of Ovaherero and Nama people and rather talks about affected communities quite conveniently, so we reject it because our identity cannot be disowned. We were killed, specifically targeted and killed as Ovaherero and Namas, acting on the instructions of the then colonial Germany. This deal is a baby born dead.
Addressing the Namibian parliament this week amidst the genocide deal protests, Namibia's Minister of Defense, Frans Kapofi, said Germany's acceptance of responsibility for the first time in over a century is an achievement of some measure and a primary step in the process of seeking restorative justice for the affected communities. But for Sam Kawapirura, special advisor to the Ovaherero paramount chief, this deal is fictitious.
This deal doesn't even mention our loss of land. We permanently lost pretty much 70-80% of our land. This business of trying to enforce a fictitious type of reconciliation, which is dressed in a flagrant denial of our rights as a direct victims of the genocide, of the first genocide of the 21st century, can simply not succeed. Germany cannot deny our genocide, yet offer apology for it. Even if she apologizes, Germany remains morally and legally liable to pay reparations, which they have rejected to pay. They're talking about reconstruction and reconciliation. They're talking about assistance and projects. Those things are not synonymous to the legal concept of repairing the wrong you have done. So in the absence of restorative justice, we cannot even begin to fathom the whole nation of reconciliation. Talking about land, the absence of a solid admission by the Germans in the agreement and our government's complicity in this regard that we have permanently lost land is actually criminal, if you ask me. And the loss of that land continues to perpetuate poverty among our communities, hardship and suffering as a result of the forcible removal from our land by the Germans. Land should, as far as we are concerned, constitute the basis for any talks with Germany regarding our genocide. So we reject this agreement that also rejects the loss of our land.
We have instruments such as the United Nations. We have instruments such as the International Court of Justice, because it's justice that is being denied or delayed our affected communities, and we will have to prosecute those avenues.
And Kawapirura challenges the world to compare Germany's different approach in the Jewish genocide deal.
They've negotiated with the Jews for something like 6 months. They started paying them a lot of money. They even paid money to individuals in their own pockets. They paid 23 Jewish organizations, and then they paid for the creation of the Jewish state. They upped the money from something like 200 billion euro to something like, 500 billion euro. And they continue paying them. So there's no similarities. With us, they call it reconstruction. It's offered on their terms. They offered it to government. They couldn't care about the affected communities. They dictate the terms of the apology and this thing. So it actually suggests racial discrimination simply because we are black.
Our special report was produced by Confidence Musasiri and narrated by Jessica Kaimu. World leaders, politicians and pop stars are among thousands of individuals revealed to be concealing huge wealth through a network of anonymous companies. The revelations, known as the Pandora Papers, are part of a huge leak of almost 12 million files from the archives of several legal firms, which is shedding light on the secret world of offshore finance. Henry Ridgewell explains.
Among the most startling revelations in the Pandora Papers is the hidden wealth of the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, and his family. The leaks show the Aliyev family and their associates traded property in Britain worth $544 million over the past 15 years. Rachel Davies-Tecker is with the anti-corruption campaign group Transparency International.
Since this family took power in 1993, they have taken control of many of the country's vital industries and its natural resources and used that to amass wealth. And this has been done at the expense of the people of that country. These are not events without harm to people. There are people who are suffering because their leaders are taking resources which should be shared out amongst those countries' citizens.
The leaked documents show that King Abdullah of Jordan built a secret property empire in the United States and Britain worth more than $100 million. Speaking Monday, Abdullah rejected claims he had tried to conceal his wealth.
There is nothing I have to hide from anyone, but we are stronger than this. And this is not the first time Jordan gets targeted.
Pakistani cabinet ministers and their families, close allies of Prime Minister Imran Khan, are revealed to own offshore companies worth millions of dollars. Khan said they would be investigated. Czech Prime Minister Andrej Babiš used anonymous offshore companies to finance the purchase of a $22 million property in France. Babiš is competing in a general election this week. In a TV debate Sunday, he defended his actions.
The money was sent out of a Czech bank. The money was taxed. It was my money, and it returned back to the Czech Republic.
It's revealed that Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta and 6 members of his family are linked to over a dozen offshore companies, one with assets worth over $30 million. There is no evidence that the Kenyatta family stole any state assets. Much of the activity revealed by the Pandora Papers, including the use of offshore companies, is legal. There is one thread that is common to many of the revelations: London. The British capital and the territories linked to it, such as the British Virgin Islands, offer a hidden network of legal structures designed to conceal who really owns the money, says Davies Tecker.
You can buy UK property anonymously if you use a company that's registered and formed in an overseas territory where there is currently secrecy. We also have luxury services on offer to the global elite. And unfortunately, we have a concerning amount of professionals, accountants, lawyers, estate agents, who are happy to help corrupt and criminal actors launder and hide and manage their wealth.
Britain's ruling Conservative Party has become embroiled in the accusations after the leaks revealed party donors were linked to alleged corruption. Chancellor Rishi Sunak Monday denied that London's reputation on tax avoidance was shameful and said the government's track record on tackling global corruption was strong. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Sierra Leonean President Julius Maada Bio says the country is changing into a West African country that respects the rule of law and protects the fundamental rights of citizens as enshrined in the Constitution. Maada Bio, who is currently holding a series of meetings with top U.S. officials and business leaders, says the negative narrative about his country is changing for the better. The president says that's due to his administration's policies, including transparency, accountability, that are encouraging to the country's development partners. In part 2 of Peter Clotty's interview with Maada Bio, the president spoke about the inclusive development of his country and about creating an enabling environment for private businesses and foreign investors.
Today, we have removed the death penalty. It has been hanging in the law books and it's been used by several governments to take away the opposition, to threaten them, to silence them. For me, I have decided that that is a thing of the past. And I took that to the Parliament of Sierra Leone, and it's off the law books today. Death penalty is no longer part of our laws. The seditious libel law. This is a law that has been used to threaten journalists, and a lot of them have been locked up. As I speak to you, that is also a thing of the past. And if you check in our prisons today, there is no journalist in prison for practicing journalism.
What about gender equity and empowerment, Mr. President? What is your administration doing about gender equity and empowerment?
When I took over, women were definitely at the edge. They did not have the necessary space. They did not have the necessary support. And what I have done, apart from bringing a lot of women into governance, is to make sure that they feel a part of our development process. They feel a part of being Sierra Leone. And that is what we are doing. Rape was rampant. I declared a national emergency, and we have brought in we have amended the Sexual Offences Act, and now it is the punitive measures are stricter. We've set up courts, special courts for that. We have special centers, one-stop centers to deal with rape and other issues. My wife compliments me very well in that regard. She is out there all the time trying to get the schoolgirls in particular to understand that they are part of Sierra Leone and that their hands are not given in marriage before they finish school, addressing issues like teenage pregnancy, addressing issues like sanitary pads, which is keeping kids away from school for nearly 70 days in the school year.
Let's talk about inclusive development as a strategy. Let's look at how do you think Sierra Leoneans feel part of this inclusive development? Because some people have said that it appears that certain parts of the country that voted for you are being developed to the contrary to others that did not necessarily support you. So would you say that all Sierra Leoneans feel part of this inclusive development that you have been talking about?
The biggest development we have today is free quality education for every child in Sierra Leone. not for any region. Be you from the north, the south, the east, and the west, the resources we have provided is for every child. That is inclusive. For me, that is in fact the most important thing. So the same opportunity my daughter has to go to school is the same opportunity you have in every part of the country. Even if you cannot afford it, the government comes to, let's say, the infrastructural development that most people talk about. At the time I took over, I come from the south, and the south and the southeast are normally blended together. In most parts of the north, every district headquarters can be reached on a paved road. And in most parts of the south and the east, most district headquarters cannot be reached on a paved road. So what do? If we are talking about inclusion, you make sure that every district headquarters can be reached on a paved road. The district where I come from has no paved road, not even a meter of paved road. I have to fix that.
That was VOA's Peter Clotty speaking with Sierra Leonean President Julius Maada Bio. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, coal provides more than 75% of South Africa's energy supply, but that may be changing. We'll explain after a short break. But first, Heidi Adams tells us about Wednesday's edition of Straight Talk Africa.
Be sure to join me on the next Straight Talk Africa. What does a free and fair election really look like? And what are the actual signs of a rigged voting system? We'll look at examples from across Africa, the Americas, and other parts of the world. And we'll examine whether complaints about elections and efforts to thwart voting rights can make people lose faith in democracy. Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
You're watching Africa 54, coming to you from the Voice of America here in Washington. Coal provides more than 75% of South Africa's energy supply, but public and corporate pressure is mounting for that to change. Protests are being seen across the country, and now a proposed Chinese-backed coal power plant may be scrapped. Linda Giftash has this report from Johannesburg.
It's what keeps lights on and industries running. But South Africa's coal energy sector is facing mounting pressure at home and abroad to end coal use for good. Frustrated with regular blackouts and the effects of pollution, citizens of the mineral-rich country rallied last week demanding cleaner, more reliable and affordable alternatives.
Electricity has always been a problem in our community. So our community members went forward and they fought for electricity. But when the electricity came, it came at a very high price, because we know that solar power is a better solution and it will be cheaper.
South Africa is among the world's top 15 largest emitters of carbon dioxide. Its reliance on coal stems from having vast quantities of the resource underground. This week, though, South Africa's government told the United Nations it is setting more ambitious climate targets. While environmentalists welcomed the commitment, they say the change to the energy sector is not happening fast enough.
We have to drastically reduce our emissions and reduce our reliance on coal by about 80% within the next 10 years, less than 10 years. We aren't seeing those changes happening fast enough. We also know that we need to essentially double our renewable energy build-out plans. That also is not happening.
As the rest of the world races to tackle climate change, analysts say pressure from businesses and foreign governments can force a faster green transition in South Africa.
If we do not reduce our overdependence on coal We will be punished by our trading partners who will set up cross-border tariffs, adjustment tariffs to ensure that their own industries in the home countries of Europe and the United States and the East are on level playing fields with South African industry.
China announced last week it would no longer fund foreign coal projects. That means a Chinese-backed coal project slated to power a new industrial complex in South Africa's northern province of Limpopo could now be on the brink. The Center of Environmental Rights that has fought new coal projects says the cancellation will be good news for the climate and for residents.
The people living in the areas where these coal-fired power stations are based are suffering daily devastating health impacts as a result of South Africa's electricity choices. And we certainly hope that means that is the end for the coal-fired power station as proposed.
Analysts say China's decision will also have longer-term ramifications for coal development in South Africa and across the continent.
China was seen to be perhaps the last outpost of finance that could be available for new coal, and there's nobody else to pick up this ball to finance this new coal-fired power. So I think the days of new coal in South Africa are over.
The prospect of cancelling coal is a major victory for protesters who want to see South Africa embrace renewables on a larger scale. Linda Giftash for VOA News, Johannesburg.
In today's health news, the World Health Organization and International Council of Nurses say only 15 of Africa's 54 nations have fully vaccinated 10% of their populations against COVID-19. A growing number of countries are mandating vaccination, which observers say is likely to encourage more people to get the jab. Meanwhile, the continent is grappling with a low supply of vaccines, and myths and misconceptions are fueling people's hesitancy to get immunized. For more insight, Africa 54 health correspondent Leone spoke with Talbot G. Nyenswa, Senior Research Associate at Johns Hopkins Bloomsburg School of Public Health and former Deputy Minister of Health, Emergencies and Epidemic Control of Liberia.
Looking at the global cases and the global counts and what has happened so far, I believe Africa has made progress, but more needs to be done in the COVID-19 fight. If you compare Africa with other WHO regions, like the Eastern Mediterranean region and the Americas, Africa is only having 3.6% of the global cases and 4.4% of the global deaths. But the challenge is the health system on our continent, the inadequacy and access to vaccines. Africa have only 4.4% of the vaccines. And if you look at also the myth and vaccine hesitancy, these are issues. But you will also know that not the entire continent is having these number of high cases. 76% of the cases are coming from just few countries. For example, South Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, Ethiopia, Libya, Nigeria, and Kenya are having the highest share of the number of cases.
One of the challenges has been the variants that have emerged. What do we know about other variants, such as the C12 that was found in South Africa, and also the Mu variant?
The issue of variant or mutation, once there is active transmission and countries in which there is active COVID-19 spread remain very, very high, potentially dangerous variants will emerge. And this is where we have dealing with the Alpha variant, especially on the continent of Africa, the Beta variants, the Delta variants, and other variants that we've been dealing with. And of recent, the Mu variant has been a variant of interest, like what described by both WHO and the CDC as being one of the most transmissible variant that is causing all of these dominant variants with the threat. But the good news is that if not all, most of the COVID-19 vaccines that have been approved by the WHO and the US FDA have shown some level of effectiveness and efficacy against the variants.
One thing is that vaccinated individuals can still get infected and still they can transmit the virus. which is fueling some people's skepticism and hesitancy. What can you tell these people that are still hesitant?
First, vaccine supposed to prevent people from getting sick. Second, COVID-19 vaccine supposed to prevent hospitalization. And third, severe disease and mortality. Those are the yardstick that we use to measure whether or not the vaccines are effective and are efficacious. And these vaccines that we have right now have proven to prevent people from getting sick, prevent people from hospitalization, prevent people from severe diseases, and people dying. The data have shown that people who have been hospitalized right now are people who have not taken the COVID-19 vaccines. There will always be breakthrough cases, that's normal, but the fact is that once people who get the breakthrough and are vaccinated and are not dying from the disease, then it means the vaccines are good for us to use.
Now, a growing number of countries are mandating vaccination. We also know that one of the challenges with Africa is having enough vaccine, having access to vaccines. How do we reconcile that?
Our African leaders should be concerned of bringing in, more supplies and access to vaccines. Overall, only 4.4% of the 1.3 billion people on the continent are getting a single shot of the COVID-19. And another thing is the issue of vaccine hesitancy, and people, what is available is not making its way in the arms of people who need them. When the rest of the global world is vaccinating about 40 to 50, 60% of their populations, Africa is lagging behind. So, the African Union, the Africa CDC, the WHO African regions should come together now and strategize using some of the facilities that are available at the COVID vaccine facility. Now, for putting in vaccine passports and putting in mandates, that's good, but to regulate such a thing on the African continent where everyone is moving from one place to another place and to regulate that would be very, very much impossible. So I would think people would not want to throw their efforts on that, but make sure, get access to vaccines and get it to the people that need them.
Dr. Githui-Ewart, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great to have you on the show.
It's a pleasure to be on. Thank you for having me.
That was Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu speaking with Tolbert G. Nyensua, Senior Research Associate, Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.